Alright, so this is a recent beef haul from my local butcher shop. Now, if you're looking for ways to save money, I highly recommend shopping local because I got all this meat, instead of buying individual steaks, extremely cheap. So I got sirloin. This was $5.29 a pound. This whole piece, this is an actual entire sirloin, was less than 50 bucks. Alright, I got hanger steak, $5.99 a pound. Way cheaper than what you can find in the grocery store. And this whole thing, $34. And my favorite is beef trimmings. So a lot of people will buy beef suet. I'm not a huge fan of beef suet. It makes great tallow, but this stuff here, this is actual trimmings off of ribeye. And the good thing about this is it comes off of all different kinds of steaks, like choice, premium cuts, things like that. So you're getting way more bang for your buck with this. You can trim this up, grind it up for your hamburger. I like to just fry it in the pan. Fantastic. Alright, so for this beef fat trimming, for this one here, I paid less than $20 for this whole thing here. This is like 5 pounds, a little over 5 pounds. But it was $3.29 a pound. Now I used to get this from another butcher shop, and they literally were just throwing this stuff away. Like, I would get it literally, they'd sell it to me for a penny a pound, just because they would throw it away. So $3.29 a pound is not bad, considering most of your calories, most of your nutrients is going to be in the fat. And then again, you get meat in here. A lot of times I'll get big chunks of meat in this. You can see this one here has quite a bit of meat on it. And again, you can just trim this up, cut it up however you want, fry it up, add it with your burger, add it with your steak. If you're eating something lean like sirloin, I always like to include some fat with that. So this is a really good way to do that. And it has a little different consistency compared to beef suet because, again, beef suet renders into tallow very well, but it doesn't cook very well if you just want to eat it. So this is a really good option for that. Alright, so again, this is a really good way to save money in today's economy. It's very needed for most people. So buying in bulk offers numerous benefits. You can usually only do that if you buy from local butcher shops, local producers. Most big retail grocery stores, they're not going to have this kind of stuff. So that's your best option. Now, if you're looking for places to buy in bulk, if you're looking for places locally that you can source your meat from, I created a farm map and a butcher shop map on my website, apexpackingtribe.com. 100% free to use. Go on there, search around. There's over 7,200 listings on this map. And you should be able to find something in your area. If you can't, let me know and I'll go out of my way to research that for you and see if I can find something. But this is a really good way to buy meat a whole lot cheaper. You get discounts, deals, things like that. When we buy from big grocery stores, all our money goes to these large corporations. So keeping our money in our local economies is one of the best things we can do. So now I will say, if you get into this, keep in mind that like some of these places offer half a cows. You can buy an entire cow from some of these places. Farms, like local farms, they offer that, like farm shares. So this may get expensive if you start doing that because you're going to need to buy a bigger freezer. Alright, so I've got 4 freezers right now that I stock up. And it's because of this. I find these deals. I can get beef a lot of times for just $2 and some change a pound. And you got to have more space. So keep that in mind. The meat's cheap, but the freezers and stuff you need to store it, maybe not so much. Alright, so I'm going to walk you through exactly what I do to butcher these up and package them and store them for, basically store them in the freezer. And the only thing you really need to do this, a good cutting board, sharp knife. I recommend the longer the knife, the better. If you go with short knives, it can be really hard to get through these big cuts. So longer knife is always better. Make sure it's very, very sharp. And that's pretty much all you need. Now you're going to need some freezer paper. You're going to need some means of storage. I usually use freezer paper. Most freezer paper has plastic lining on one side. I don't like using plastic. I try to get away from it, but it's really hard to get away from plastic. My 3 most common ways that I store meat is freezer paper, freezer bags, and vacuum sealing. And again, all 3 of those use plastic. It's really, really hard to get away from plastic. So if any of y'all have a tip on how to avoid plastic when freezing meat, please let me know. Drop a comment down below. If there's a way to do it, I would love to get away from using plastic because so far it's been pretty tough to avoid that. So again, if you know of a way, let me know in the comments below. Alright, so we're going to start with my personal favorite, beef fat trimmings. So again, the only thing you need, this is nothing mind-boggling, sharp knife. Make sure it has a very, very sharp edge. Wooden cutting board. I recommend staying away from plastic. When you use plastic cutting boards, it gets in your food. You want to avoid that. So a good clean wood cutting board. And I'm gonna show you a tip on how to keep this cutting board stuck down, because what I like to do is flip this over and use the other side for other stuff. So I don't like putting like non-stick pads on here or stick pads on there. So I'm gonna show you a trick on how you can get this thing to kind of hold still without having to actually put something on the bottom that's permanent. The only thing you need is a paper towel, and you just want to wet this down just a little bit. Put some water on there and then kind of wring it dry. And then put this down on your countertop and then just lay your cutting board on it. And that's going to keep it from sliding around. And will keep you safe, because when your cutting board slides, you could slip your knife, cut yourself. You don't want that to happen. So just like that, and it's in place. Perfect, good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this fat up. Now keep in mind, when it comes to fat, there is no right or wrong way to do this. All right, I'm just showing you exactly what I do. I like to cut it up into kind of small sections because, again, I use this to fry, I use this for burger, and when I cut it up in small pieces, I can package it that way. When I pull it out, it breaks apart a lot easier. That's why I don't like packaging it whole. But there's no grain to worry about. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You can cut it up exactly how you want. Again, I'm just showing you how I do it. So I just lay this thing out, and then I'm going to cut it up pretty much in just small pieces. Like I said, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you're doing it whatever fits your lifestyle the best and however you plan on using it. Alright, so this is more or less how I'll end up doing most of my fat. So small chunks like this. These are great for throwing in a pan if you need some extra fat in your meal. Or you can grind these up with your hamburger. It goes in the grinder pretty well, mixes with the meat, and it's just kind of a universal way of doing it depending on what you're using it for. So I'll just cut these up like this. I'm going to set them off to the side, and then once I get a big pile going, I'll start packaging it up. Alright, so here's all the fat all cut up. So again, this was a little over 5 pounds. I paid less than $20 for this. This is premium, high quality nutrition. Now, I've traveled all around the world, alright? I've seen a lot of beautiful stuff. There's not much more beautiful than this. Alright, so the next one I'm going to cut up is the hanger steak. Now, this is similar to a flank steak, and this actually makes a really good piece that you can just grill as is. But since I'm freezing this thing, I'm packaging it up so I can eat it later. I'm going to cut it up. Alright, so the way I'm going to cut this up, and again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, alright? So I like to cut mine up kind of thicker. I'll do usually 1 inch to 1.25 inch steaks. You can cut these up in any thickness you want. So if you want to do 1 inch, if you want to do 3/4 of an inch, that's totally up to you. I'm just going to show you how I do it. Again, I try to stay inch, 1.25 inch. I don't measure it out. I just kind of eyeball it. So I just start at one end, and you always want to kind of cut against the grain. You can see here the grain kind of goes this way towards the end of the meat, so it's running lengthwise. So you want to cut across that. Again, cut against the grain, whatever thickness you want. I'm just going to cut the end off here real quick. Get that out of the way. You can see this meat has some really good marbling in there. Alright, so with the end cap off, this is what you're basically left with. You can see there's kind of a split here, but I'm going to go ahead and start my steaks at this point. And I'm going to start probably about 1 inch from here and just start cutting my steaks out. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just kind of eyeball it and then get your steaks cut out. So here's the first steak. Beautiful marbling. All right, so I'm going to take that, throw that in my pan, and just continue that. It's very, very simple. And you can kind of see why the paper towel under the cutting board is needed, because some of this stuff you're cutting through tendon, so your cutting board is going to slip on you, and you have some end cap on here as well, some membrane. Some people trim that off. I leave all that stuff on there. I can always trim it off later if I want to when I go to grill these. So for me, it's just a lot easier. Just cut it up, package it the way it is. You know, I could actually pull this off and feed this to my dog. This would be great scraps for her. But it's totally up to the person, however you want to do it. Now again, on this steak, you can see it's got kind of a thick membrane on top. Some of this is fat, some of it's just tendon. So for this piece here, this is a little fat on top, but that's all tendon. So I'll end up cutting this away and I'll give this to my dog. This tendon is a great source of collagen for your dog, so I would definitely save that. I never get rid of any food. I use every single thing off every piece of meat I consume. And what I don't eat goes straight to my dog. Alright, hanger steaks are done. Now, I got 18 steaks out of this package. This was a little over 5 pounds of steak. Again, I got this for $5.99 a pound. Alright, I've seen this stuff in grocery stores. Usually ranges from $13 to $17 a pound, which is comparable to ribeye. And I gotta say, the marbling in this, I'm extremely happy with the way these steaks look. This is phenomenal. I mean, these are beautiful steaks, and for $5.99 a pound, you cannot beat that. Alright, so the last one is a sirloin. And again, I got this for $5.29 a pound. Now you can find this at big retail chains for about $10, $11 a pound. This is about 10 pounds of meat, and this is local beef. So this is going to be much higher quality than the stuff you get from the grocery stores. And again, it's much cheaper, about half price actually. Alright, so again, there's no right or wrong way to cut this thing up. So you can cut them up into any size you want. Again, I do about inch to inch and a quarter usually. I just kind of eyeball it. But the main thing to pay attention to on this cut of meat here, and pretty much with any cut of meat, is the direction of the grain. So on this one, you can kind of see that it's got a few different ways this is going. This is just tendon here, but the grain itself is kind of running this way. If you look at the end here, you can kind of see how it goes down. You can see the striations in the muscle. So I'm going to cut it this way. I'm going to cut it across, and that's how you get your best steaks. So this cut of meat has quite a bit of tendon on the end. It's got some of the silver skin here, so I'm going to go ahead and trim this off, and then this is going to be allocated for my dog. And you know, some people, they leave this on. Sometimes I leave it on, but this one just has some excess here. So just to save time when I go to cook this stuff, because I'm probably going to be hungry, I'm going to trim this off. All right, so to trim this off, I'm actually going to use a boning knife. The knife I was using before is a little too big to do this, and you want something that's going to kind of flex, and something a little bit longer where you can get under there and just kind of pull it off. So to start, I usually just kind of pull it up, and then I'll just run my blade straight in there, and then just start peeling it back. So if you can get it started, and then just kind of peel it back as you cut, it should come off pretty easily. Now there's some fat on here too. I'll save that. I won't give that to my dog, but all the actual tendon, I'm going to actually save and give to her. And you can see the tendon under here. That's the stuff, when it's on your steak, it's just really, really hard to chew up. So that's why I'm trimming it first. Alright, so again, if you keep the tension on this, you can keep from cutting into your meat, because you only want to get that tendon. Now, it's going to be impossible in some cases to not get some meat. Like you can see here, I got a little bit of meat, but if you keep it pulled out, you'll just reduce the risk of actually losing meat when you get rid of your tendon. And again, these chunks here, these are perfect for your dog. There's tendon in here, it's good collagen, plus you've got the meat. And if this is stuff that you won't eat, it's great for your pup. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this up. Again, the grain on this piece of meat is going this way, so I'm going to make my cut straight across. I'm going to do this just the same way I did the hanger steak. I'm going to cut the very end off, and then I'll start cutting my steaks, eyeballing it about an inch or so, and that should give me some pretty good thick steaks. So I'm just cutting the end off here. Now, cutting these bigger pieces of meat, you do have to hang on to it pretty tight because it's going to want to move on you. So the end's coming off, and I'll just end up cooking that up. And then I'm going to start making my 1-inch steaks. So there's a good little baby steak there. You are going to want a very sharp knife for this, because for sirloin especially, there's a lot of muscle separation. So you're going to have tendon within this muscle, and cutting through that can be really tough if you don't have a knife that is extremely sharp. Another good steak. Alright, so again on this steak you can see the muscle separation, so that's why it requires a very, very sharp knife, because getting through this can be really tough. But these are some beautiful steaks. There's a little bit of marbling in there, a little bit of fat, but it's a really, really lean cut, and it complements the fat that I cut up earlier very, very well. So something else to keep in mind on steaks that have a lot of separation in the muscle like this, if you wanted to, you could absolutely separate this piece of meat, and you can make this an individual steak, this an individual steak, and this an individual steak, and essentially get 3 pieces of steak out of this. Now, I'm kind of a big boy. I like to eat large steaks, so I keep mine whole, but just keep that in mind. That's another option. If you do separate it, you're going to have tendon along one side of it, so it's up to you on whether or not you want to trim that out. But this is kind of tough, so you may want to do the same thing and kind of trim that tendon away for every steak that you cut up. Alright, so I'm down to the last bit, and this can be kind of weird to cut because it's wedge shaped. So getting a straight cut on this can be really tough. So I'm just going to flip this over on its flat side, and then I'm going to cut it this way. And it makes holding it a lot easier. You don't have to worry about it moving, slipping around on you, and you can get more consistent steaks this way. And you can see those turn out pretty fantastic even when they're turned that way. I'm gonna flip it one more time and then finish this thing off. Some nice little strip steaks. All right, this one's all cut up. And again, this was about 10 pounds of meat. Now, I got roughly 10 steaks out of this, and each one is about a pound. So if you wanted to, you could probably get 15 to 20 steaks out of this piece of meat. And when you boil it down, that comes down to like $2 to $3 a steak, which is extremely cheap. I mean, people talk about meat being expensive. This is cheaper than a cup of coffee for a steak this size. And like I said, these are about a pound a piece. So with these done, I'm going to go ahead and move these over and start packaging this stuff up. So there's 3 ways I usually like to package my meat. You can vacuum seal, you can use freezer bags, or my preferred method is using freezer paper. All right, so this is what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to go through all the steps I take to package everything up. And the only thing you really need here is a Sharpie to label everything. I usually put the cut of the steak it is, the quantity on there, and then the date. That way you know how long it's been in your freezer. Need some freezer tape, a pair of scissors because the cutters on these packages really suck, and then some freezer paper. Now this is plastic lined. I'm trying to get away from that, and again, if you know any way to get away from that, let me know in the comments below. But this is BPA free at least, and for now this is what I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this, start packaging these steaks up so I can get them in the freezer. Alright, so I got my freezer paper laid out. You want to be plastic side up if you're using plastic lined paper. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and package these. Now I'm gonna do 2 steaks per pack. So I'm gonna put my first one down here. And then I've got these little pieces of freezer paper cut, and I put that on top of my steak as a divider. And then I put my second steak on top of that. If you don't do that, your steaks will stick together and they will not come back apart until they're completely thawed out. So this piece of paper in between just helps if I only want to eat 1 steak out of this pack before they're completely thawed. I can just pull that steak off and it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Alright, there's several ways you can do this. So I'm going to show you 2 ways I usually do it. The first way, I call this the toothpaste method. And basically what I do is just bring the ends together and then just kind of fold this over. And then roll this down like you would a tube of toothpaste. Alright, and then you want to get it as tight as you can. And once you've got it good and tight, put a piece of tape on there. And then I'm going to fold the ends and then roll those in the same way. And the key is to just get as much air out of the package as you possibly can. And that's going to make sure your steaks stay fresh for a lot longer. And then the same thing on the other end. Alright, so this is what you're left with. So we got the steak packaged up. It's pretty airtight. You can see it's not really much air in there. Alright, so the other method, I call this the burrito method. Let me go ahead and lay my steaks on here. Put my separator in. So for this way, you just want to move your steaks into the corner, and then you're going to roll this up onto itself, kind of like you would a burrito. Fold the ends in until you get to the end, and that pretty much wraps it up pretty tight and gets all the air out of there. So again, just fold the corner over and then wrap it a couple times. Keep it as good and tight as you possibly can. Alright, once you've got it wrapped a couple times, fold the ends in and then wrap it the rest of the way up. And again, you want to keep it held as tight as you can so you get the air out of it. Alright, and then once it's wrapped up, just put some tape on the end. I like to throw a couple pieces on there. and then you're good to go. So again, I'm going to label this. My labeling method's kind of weird, but I'm going to do sirloin steak. And 2 per pack. Alright, so this is everything completely butchered up, packaged. It's not pretty, but it works. And I've never had a problem packaging my meat this way. I've never had a problem with freezer burn or anything like that. I hunt quite a bit, so I package a lot of deer meat. And some of that meat stays in my freezer for over a year, and I've never had a problem with freezer burn. So this seems to work pretty well. But we got all this meat. This is about 16 pounds of steaks, and then that 5 pounds of beef trimmings for less than $100. All right, and I just want to caveat this by saying you can avoid this entire process because most meat packing facilities and butcher shops and local places will actually package the meat for you. Now, I just happen to like doing this kind of thing. I'm kind of weird like that, so I bring it home, I package it myself. But if this isn't for you, you can still shop local, and you can have your butcher shop or your farm or whoever you're getting it from package it for you. So a lot of times that's a service that butcher shops and farms offer for free. My butcher shop does that. They offer packaging and stuff free of charge because when you're buying the meat there, it's a nice incentive they offer to customers, you know, customers that don't know how to do it themselves. And it also just keeps customers coming through the door. So, but again, I like doing it myself, and if you don't know how, this should at least point you in the right direction. There's a million ways to do this. There's no right or wrong. If you're looking for local meat, feel free to visit my website. I'm going to put a link in the description. Like I said, the map on there is free to use, and there's over 7,200 listings. So if you can't find something in your area, it's probably unlikely, but let me know, and I'll do some search around, see if I can find something for you. But I got me a nice little plate of steak, so I'm going to grill it tonight. I'm going to get to it. I'm getting kind of hungry. All this chopping up of the meat's kind of built up my appetite. So I'm going to go out here and grill these things up,